The first rule of Fright Club is that you can't join if you have a heart condition or high blood pressure. That's just common sense though, right? The second rule is that you can't leave the room until the bell rings. Whatever you see or feel in there, whatever sees or feels you, that's your reality until the round is over. The third rule is that you cannot take anything with you or let anything follow you out. The poster said that breaking any of these rules makes the participant ineligible to win the $10,000 grand prize, which comes with a unique internship opportunity. The cartoon pumpkin and witch stickers didn't make it sound very threatening. Besides, the poster had my university logo on it, and everyone knows that school-sponsored events are lame and politically correct by necessity. "You can't not do it," my friend Jesse told me. "It's free money." This coming from the guy whose retirement plan is buying a lottery ticket every month. "There has to be a catch," I told him. "They charged me to print out my resume so I could apply to their own job offers. You aren't going to get it." "Let's make it more interesting then," he said. "Bet you $100 that I last longer than you, whatever it is." $10,000 is $10,000, but showing up my friend and taking his money? Now that's priceless. I agreed to check it out, and we both went to the specified room in the psychology building after our classes finished for the day. The stickers made it easy to find the right place. Big black cauldrons with frothing brew, zombies and skeletons, ghosts with their billowing sheets and demons with pitchforks. The scrawny teenager in the long black cloak who checked us in was even less intimidating. "You know the 3 rules?" he asked when we said we'd like to join. "Yeah. But what's up with something following you out?" I asked. The teenager shrugged. "Dono, I figure they just don't want to make a mess in the rest of the building." "Has anyone won yet?" Jesse asked. "Maybe." He scratched the back of his head with the intensity of a dog chasing fleas. "Man, just let me read from the script, okay?" He coughed and held up a clipboard, beginning again in what he must have thought was a dark and spooky voice. It sounded more like Dracula's gay lover to me. Once upon a time in a faraway land, an aging king had to decide which of his 3 sons would next sit upon the throne. Believing bravery to be most important, the king devised Fright Club to test which of his sons were worthy. Seriously? What self-respecting king would call his test Fright Club? Jesse asked. The teenager gave us a long, suffering look, like a waiter when you ask him to taste your gluten-free food to see if he thought could still taste the gluten. "Ever since Fright Club has been passed down through the generations," the cloaked guy continued. "Dare ye enter to see if you too are brave enough to be king?" "Is that what we're interning for? Being king?" Jesse quipped. "Just sign the damn form," the teenager snapped. "I don't know anything more than you do." I picked at one of the pumpkin stickers on the wall while Jesse was signing. It peeled cleanly back to reveal a little hole in the wall. It was time for me to sign, though, so I pressed the sticker back into place and pretended I didn't see anything. I thought that I might be able to get an advantage from this insight later. The teenager, meanwhile, produced a large uncarved pumpkin from beneath a table and left it in the middle of the room. He set a timer on the table for 10 minutes and said he'd check back after the first round was over. Then he was gone, and it was just me, Jesse, and the pumpkin. "I don't get it," Jesse said, pacing the perimeter of the room. "What are we supposed to—" The lights went, suspending the room in nearly complete darkness. The only light came from the stickers, which apparently glowed. "Ooh, I'm a 4-year-old. I need a nightlight because I'm scared of the dark," Jesse whined. "Shut up. Do you hear something?" I asked. "Yeah, I think so. It sounds a bit like the easiest $100 I ever made." I didn't reply. I was intent upon the scraping, scratching sound, like a knife peeling a potato or... "Something is carving the pumpkin. Listen." I felt my way toward the center of the room and the sound grew stronger. It was a wet, juicy sound, and I could clearly smell the freshly cut pumpkin. "My phone isn't turning on," Jesse grumbled. "Can you see what's happening?" I fumbled in my pocket. My phone was dead too, although it had been at half battery the last time I checked. I gingerly probed the darkness with my foot until I found the pumpkin. I reached down to feel it with my fingers, but immediately recoiled at the soft, warm touch. "It doesn't feel like a pumpkin," I said. Jesse traced my voice and quickly located it as well. I felt him kneeling beside me. "That's a head, dude. Check it, I've got the nose right here." I felt along his arm until I reached his hand, then back to the invisible pumpkin. It was undeniable. The shape, the flexible cartilage, even the lips and teeth below it. There was a human head on the floor where the pumpkin had been. "This is kid stuff, dude," Jesse said with the slightest tremor in his throat. "I wonder how much time we've got left." "So what's the sound coming from if it's not a pumpkin?" I asked. My hand was still tracing the face when I felt the jaw suddenly open. The scraping sound grew louder. Something brushed against my fingers, evidently exiting the mouth. I stumbled back a few paces. "Jesse, did you feel that? Where are you?" "Over here, man. I'm getting some glow stickers to try and see what's going on." I spotted him against the wall, his hands vaguely illuminated by the small stack of stickers he'd already peeled off. The scraping sound was coming from the walls now, too. Something was coming through the holes behind the stickers. "Stop it! Put them back," I said. "Chill, dude. You're just jealous you didn't think of it first." "Hurry then. Come on, that's enough." His pale, illuminated hands were carrying about a dozen glowing stickers. I watched him grab 2 more before carrying the pile toward the middle of the room. Then his hands hesitated, and he changed direction. "Hold on a second. I'm just going to check the timer." The scraping was getting louder by the second, like sandpaper along a rough surface, or hundreds of tiny legs skittering. 3 minutes. No big deal. Something flying brushed my face. Then another one. The whir of unseen wings beat against the blackness all around me. "I want out of here," I said. "Come on, we're almost there. I bet it's just like stuff on strings swinging around." His glowing hands were moving toward the center of the room. "Are you encouraging me to stay now? Don't you care about winning anymore?" "Whatever, I can win next round instead. I just don't want to be alone in here." "Aha! I knew it. You are afraid." The triumph of that realization gave me courage. It was easy to forget that we were still at school with the dark buzzing all around us. "Do you remember when we were freshmen and that those 3 guys started following us one night?" Jesse was standing directly over where the pumpkin was, but the light didn't reach far enough down. "Yeah, so what?" I asked. "You remember how we kept taking random routes to lose them, but they kept making all the same turns?" He still wasn't moving. "What are you waiting for?" I asked. "Light that sucker up." Then how we started running and they ran too, but they were just playing a prank on us to scare us. More flying things were brushing against me. They kept landing on my face or the back of my neck. My hands were non-stop windshield wipers now, but it still wasn't enough to keep them off. "What does that have to do with anything?" I asked. "Is this a pep talk or something?" "No," he said. "I just wanted you to remember." He finally knelt down with the glowing stickers. If that was a fake head on the ground, then it was the realest fake head I'd ever seen. From the congealed blood at the base of the severed neck to the flies and maggots swarming out of its mouth, everything looked exactly how I'd imagine it should. "I just want you to know how well I tricked you. I know everything Jesse knew, because I already got him the second the lights turned off." The glowing handful of stickers illuminated Jesse's head on the ground. But it couldn't really be him, because I've been hearing his voice the whole time. Hadn't I? I studied the hands that were holding the glowing stickers. For the first time, I noticed how large and rough they were, how much hair was on the knuckles. The light wasn't strong enough to see the rest of him, but in that moment I was 100% certain that those were not Jesse's hands. "Run," Jesse's voice said from the darkness. "I'm not leaving before you do, Jesse," I said, addressing the head on the ground. 100, that's the deal, but I'm not leaving without you either. "That's good," said Jesse's voice. His pitch was growing deeper with each word, though. "I'll see you again in round 2 then." The hands cupped to cover the glowing stickers and disappeared along with the head. There was no sound but the mad buzzing of insects, although this too grew fainter and more distant by the moment. I crossed my arms and stood stubbornly still until the bell rang. The lights came on an instant later, just in time for me to see the last few insects crawling into the holes in the wall. They looked like wasps, but were at least 3 inches long with monstrous spiral stingers. They reminded me of those army knives that were supposed to leave wounds that couldn't be closed. "Round 1 clear," the teenager said with forced enthusiasm. "Congratulations." I blinked rapidly to readjust to the light. There was a pumpkin in the middle of the floor again. Jesse's head and the other figure were nowhere to be seen. "What about Jesse?" I asked. "Did he leave early?" "Who?" "Jesse, the other guy who took the test with me." The teenager scratched his head vigorously, hard enough for there to be blood under his fingernails when he withdrew his hand. "I don't know what you're talking about. Only one person at a time is allowed to take the tests. You came in here alone." "Jesse hasn't answered my calls since I got out. No one has seen him anywhere. I can only hope there will be more answers in the second round. The second rule is that you can't leave the room until the bell rings. Whatever you see or feel in there, whatever sees or feels you, that's your reality until the round is over." I guess I shouldn't have been surprised to find Jesse waiting for me inside the Fright Club room. The severed head had been pretty convincing too, though, and I was cautious not to close the door completely behind me. We were the only ones in the room, and it was empty except for a table covered by a sheet. "Nice robe," I told him. "What happened to the other guy?" Jesse was scratching his right forearm. Hard. It sounded like the nails were splintering. "Huh? Hey man, haven't seen you in..." His voice trailed off. He turned his attention back toward scratching his red arm. "So you work here now?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Yeah, since..." Scratch, scratch, scratch. Then he stole a glance at me, shying away from meeting my eyes. "Your hair is different," he said. "Longer. A lot longer. Is that a wig?" The shock of finding him occupied my initial attention. Now that he mentioned it, though, he looked different too. He was paler and skinnier than he was yesterday, with rough stubble that couldn't have grown overnight. "No, just combed weird," I replied cautiously. I could only hope that this was the real Jesse, but I couldn't let my guard down. "You know how it is, man," Jesse said. "It's not like the king asks whether someone wants the job or not. Someone's got to do it though, right?" "Sure," I lead him on. "Otherwise, how would the king know who was going to rule after him?" "You know what's up," Jesse bobbed and nodded. He moved towards me, but I got out of the way to give him space. My mistake. He was headed for the door, not for me. I'd let him get between me and my only exit. He roughly closed it and turned to face me. "Are we ready to begin?" Jesse asked. A muffled ticking began before I could answer. I couldn't make out where it was coming from, though. "How long have we had a king?" I asked. He grinned like he was in on the joke. I didn't follow up with anything, though, and gradually the smile cracked at the edges to draw the lips tight and thin. Always, but you've just got 10 minutes. I felt an anxious rush as though it were my time running out instead of the game's. I saw you dead, I said. Yeah, he replied hoarsely. I felt it too, like lightning through my throat, and then everything went numb, and I saw my body tumbling away. He turned away, his hands on the back of his neck, scratching. That was only my other, though. I guess your other is still alive? I hadn't considered that. I didn't want to consider that. The king said we'll know when our double dies, even if he's in the parallel universe, the other Jesse continued. I thought it would be more like a notification, though. I didn't expect to actually feel him die. I don't understand this round, I interrupted. I was getting impatient and frustrated. What's supposed to be scary about this? This one isn't supposed to be scary, the other Jesse said. He went to the table and began rolling back the sheet. There's more to bravery than not being scared, like enduring pain, for example. A thin, naked body was revealed beneath the sheet. I winced as it turned toward me, recognizing my own face staring back. Yeah, that's the short hair I remember, Jesse said, staring at the thin body. Then to me, I guess that makes you the other. The ticking was louder now. It was coming from the body on the table. Jesse continued rolling back the sheet until he reached the stomach and the alarm clock embedded deep within the flesh. It looked like an old wound because the skin had grown around it to hold it in place with hardened scar tissue. What's it like? The other side? Jesse turned away from the body. I wish I could too, but my eyes were fixed. What's the king like? The ticking stopped. My other groaned and shifted on the table. We don't have a king, I told the other Jesse. No king. The other Jesse sighed. I wish I could go back with you. I may have been slow to realize it, but that's when it really hit me. This room, maybe the whole building, but definitely this room, wasn't in my reality. I was already on the other side. What's going on? I asked. Why did the clock stop? You've got to take it out to resume it, Jesse said. Otherwise the round will never end. The face of the clock barely protruded from my other's skin. I didn't know how far back it extended, but removing it would leave a gaping hole that would doubtlessly be a mortal wound. My other whimpered and closed his eyes. My eyes. His eyes. It didn't matter. I shook my head and went for the door. I'm not going to kill him, I said. Jesse didn't move to stop me, so I accelerated until I reached the exit. I only came back because I thought I could save you. You can come with me. Third rule, Jesse replied. Fine, suit yourself. I'm going. Only I wasn't. Opening the door, there was no school hallway or decorated walls. There was a long corridor of rough stone with red flickering electric lights, and a rising echo, a distant scream reverberating through the stone. I swiftly closed the door again. The second rule. Shut up. Shut the hell up, I said, angrily pacing back. I'm not going to do it. Jesse shrugged and resumed scratching. What the hell is wrong with you anyway? I asked. He shrugged again, focusing on his task. I was getting really agitated, but I couldn't control it. I paced restlessly, trying not to look at my other's frail body. The only other place to look was at the other Jesse and his incessant scratching. Scratch, scratch, scratch. He was beginning to draw blood. It beaded out of his forearm to dribble down toward his wrist. I stared as he picked at the tattered skin, peeling it back like a child playing with dried glue. There was something moving underneath. Small black fingers, quick as anything, darted out of the wound to draw the skin back together. I only saw it for a moment, but it was enough. I worked up the courage to stand over my other on the table. He wasn't me, no matter how much he looked like it. He wasn't human, although that thought was an even harder sell, because his face held so much suffering and resignation. Okay. Deep breath. I'm sorry, I said to the thing wearing my face. It didn't hear or didn't react if it did. I grabbed the clock with my fingertips and began to pull. My other started to scream and I reflexively released, feeling the building pressure in my own stomach release as well. Then gritting my teeth, I grabbed again, dragging it out 1 excruciating centimeter at a time. Blood was swelling from beneath the clock, soaking my fingers and making it slippery and hard to hold. At the same time, I could feel the gouging pressure in my own stomach explode into a white-hot knot of pain. My other began to thrash on the table, but I pulled even harder. This wasn't happening. He's not human. I'm not really killing him. I'm not really dying. The words made no impact on the agony of the moment. It doesn't matter whether this was reality or not. It was real to me. The small black fingers emerged from my other's open wound and danced around the clock, dragging it back inside. I wrestled with them, but they were incessant, and I was growing weak from pain. I needed something sharp, something to cut it out with, but I had nothing but my own hands. I managed to get the clock completely out of the skin, but I couldn't break the grip of the dark fingers. My only choice was to hold the clock with one hand while using the other to reach inside the wound, feeling around the back of the clock to try to turn it back on. This blind maneuver was subtle, and it as almost impossible to concentrate because I could feel a hand rummaging around in my own stomach the whole while. Click, then ticking. At last, the clock was going again. I released the clock and dragged my hand out of my other's stomach cavity. The pressure immediately vanished in my own stomach, but the shock was enough to leave me panting and heaving on all fours. I heard my own scream, but I couldn't be sure whether it was coming from me or my other. I stayed there on my hands and knees, waiting for the pain to slowly subside until it was nothing more than a dull ache. The bell finally rang. If I finish all 3 trials, do I become king? I asked at last. That's how it's usually done, Jesse said. And I could do whatever I want then, right? I could break my own rules and let people out, or stop playing games with them, or anything I wanted. I don't see who would stop you. So when does the final round start? The third and final rule is that you cannot take anything with you or let anything follow you out. It's the only rule I tried to break during my trials. I wanted to bring my double with me when I left the second round. The black fingers did wonders to mend his wound from the inside, and though broken in spirit, there was still breath dragging from his lungs when I left. But for an accident of birth, I could have been that tormented pawn in this unholy game. Or maybe I was no less of a pawn than him. Maybe I was him and there was no difference at all. It's still very confusing for me. Ultimately, I decided that I would do no good for anyone unless I could pass the third round, though, and I left him so as not to jeopardize my chances. The king was waiting in the open door of the Fright Club room for the third round. On his head rested a thin crown of twisted black wire, but I didn't need that to recognize him. The thick hair on his hands, the deep voice when he welcomed me. He was the man who had killed the real Jesse in the first round. More than that, though, it was the familiarity in his ancient face that made me so certain. Is that really what I'm going to look like when I get old? I asked him. From the set of his jaw to the sharp angles of his nose and high arching brows, I knew I was looking at another version of myself, despite the toll of years. If you get old, the king replied. He smiled and stepped aside graciously, gesturing for me to enter. The room didn't have the facade of a classroom anymore. Cold stone and red electric light trailed off into a sea of shadows in the massive space. The air was musty and cold when I stepped inside, and sound echoed and lingered beneath the massive dome overhead. It reminded me somewhat of a Gothic cathedral, except that in place of religious iconography, there were only statues and carved designs of strange and monstrous creatures that had never been seen on Earth. "Stand with your others," the king said in a voice accustomed to being obeyed. "We'll begin when the last contestants have arrived." I shivered as I moved toward the dozen other shapes. They were sitting on a row of benches, which were arranged around the perimeter of the round room. I can't say I was surprised to see each wearing my face as they tracked my progress toward them. That's not to say that there weren't still variations between us, though. One was young, looking just as I had 10 years ago, wearing the bright red sweatshirt that I remember wearing to school every day. Another was hardly recognizable because of his dozens of piercings, and a third was even female, sharing my features in the way twins might. Their clothes ranged from coarse hand-sewn linens to sleek suits and everything in between, including two wearing a seamless metallic substance which fit them as close as a second skin. Hi," I said to the assembly of my others. "My name is—" They knew my name, because it chorused back to me at once. "That's what we're all called," the youngest one chimed in. "Sure, okay," I said. "That's going to get confusing, though, don't you think?" The female version of myself said, "It shouldn't be a problem. Only one of us will leave this place." "Did the king tell you that?" I asked. They all glanced back and forth, reading each other's faces with unspoken acknowledgement. No, they didn't have to be told. Deep down, they just knew, and so did I. "How are we the only ones to make it to the end?" I asked. Again, I knew the answer before I'd even finished asking, but the silence of this place begged to be filled. "The others were killed as soon as they began the first round," the woman said. "We're the only ones he wants." "But why?" The king's deep voice echoed indistinctly. All froze and turned their attention toward two more of us, me 20 years from now, with a large belly and receding hair, and another me whose gaunt and haunted expression looked like the mugshot of a heroin addict. "It would be best if I answered that," the king said, following the two latest arrivals toward us. "It all begins with a king and his 3 sons. Stop me if you've heard this one." "None of the 3 sons passed," my other in a suit said. "They all died in the 3rd round." The king beamed. I half expected him to take a treat from his pocket and throw it at my other. Instead, he said, "Correct." And it is a blessing that they did, for it would be a greater tragedy by far to have a weak king sit upon the throne. Imagine now that poor old man whose sand ran swiftly through the hourglass. He had watched all 3 of his dear sons die, and now his kingdom would be lost without a strong hand upon the reins follow. The king continued walking toward the center of the room as he drew level with us. We stood and followed him across the uneven stone. "None were worthy to sit upon the throne," the king continued, "save for the king himself. If he could conjure a magic draft to live forever, doubtless he would be ruling still. Instead, he did the next best thing. He found a way to create his other and crown a younger self, and so he began his rule again." The king stopped at the center of the room where a large pit was carved into the floor. Inside the 3-foot drop, the pit was filled with fine powdered sand. Embedded in the sand were swords, spears, axes, and other strange bladed devices that I could not recognize. In the very center of the sand was a large-faced clock. Each king has refined this subtle art and passed on his knowledge, until now we are no longer limited to a single other. We create all the variations of ourselves and spread them so each may have different experiences and lives. Each comes from different epochs with different talents. Only this king among kings is fit to rule hereafter, and only one of you is worthy." I closed my eyes but could not block the image of what must surely come next. He would have us fight and kill one another here, until only one was left. And worse still, each wound and death that we inflict upon one another must also be felt upon ourselves. Such was the agony of the clock in the second round. And if we don't, I was first to break the heavy silence. "If we all refuse to rule, and you are left to wait for your age to take you?" "You aren't the first to ask that," the king said. "It only takes one of you to want it, though. And knowing myself, it's more than one." My others sensed it too, as they must thinking with my mind. We looked to one another for comfort, but saw only the eyes of our victims or our murderer looking back at us. The same ambition which drove me to return for the final round must also burn in their hearts. I could trust none of them any more than I could trust myself, and in such desperate circumstances, I did not value my nobility high. "I won't kill you," whispered the girl out of the corner of her mouth. "Thanks," I whispered back. "That's the nicest thing anyone has said to me all day." She coughed discreetly. The king glanced at us, then turned away. "And?" she prompted. "You're supposed to say you won't kill me either." "Oh, right. Yeah, definitely not. I mean, there isn't really another option, but hopefully not." The king was starting to pull the weapons from the sand. He was still talking. Something about the glory of victory and the honor of besting yourself. I wasn't really listening anymore. "We could run." She barely mouthed the words, but our minds were already running down the same road. "We'd have to break the third rule," I said. "The king is our other two," she interrupted. "When one of us is killed, he'll feel it too. That will be our chance. I don't want to go alone." The king was looking at us again. I didn't reply, but I gave the slightest nod. That would be enough for her to understand. It was enough for the king, too. "You, boy, from the university. You're first." The king hurled a sword at me, handle first. I snatched it and almost dropped it immediately, surprised by its weight. "Suit, you too. Let's make this quick." I felt several hands on my back pushing me toward the pit. I glanced back at the girl, the subtlest nod. But before we could break for it, someone had to die. And if I was in the first round, that meant that I had to kill. The suit was holding a set of javelins when I dropped onto the sand. If I were him, I wouldn't hesitate. That's why I rolled the instant I hit the ground, just in time before the first spear quivered in the sand beside me. The ticking of the clock began, but I wasn't playing anymore. There wasn't anywhere left to hide. He'd expect me to charge straight at him, trying to close the distance to use my sword. I took a sharp right instead, feeling the air of a second javelin digging into the ground. He'd be ready for that trick next time, but I wouldn't give him the chance. I dashed across the sand directly toward him. My feet were sinking with every step, though, and it was taking longer to reach him than I expected. I tried to dodge again as he raised his arm, but he held the javelin this time and waited until the last possible moment. I tried to switch directions again, but I lost my footing in the loose sand and tumbled to the ground. A few feet away from him and helplessly mired, he wouldn't miss again. The pain came with an explosion of light and heat, in one side and out the other, straight through the heart. I was dead, and the only mystery left was wondering how I knew I was dead. "Run! Everyone, now is your chance!" the girl screamed. I was back on my feet before I realized what happened. My combatant fell to his knees, the tip of a knife protruding from his chest. The girl was standing behind. He never threw the last javelin. It was his death that I'd felt. I scrambled out of the pit and helped her out behind me. The old king was clutching his chest and gasping for breath. Everyone was in an equal state of shock and pain, but the older ones were slower to recover. Some of us broke away and started running for the door, the youngest boy, the girl, and the middle-aged man. "Kill them!" the king roared. "Shoot them in the back. It'll save you trouble in the arena." Swords bouncing off the stone, the whir of projectiles in the air, neither as terrifying as seeing my faces contorted in rage and bloodlust as they charged after me. "He recovered too fast," I yelled. "He won't let us escape." "Keep going, trust me," the girl said. I wanted to explain that I couldn't trust her because I couldn't trust myself, but I decided not to waste the air. We leapt over the benches. Behind me, I heard one of them turn over as someone stumbled and fell. It was the youngest boy, sprawled out on the stone on the other side of an upturned bench. The boy was on his knees again in a second, but not fast enough. The whir of a crossbow and the fatal pain returned, like a drill bursting through the back of my skull. I kept running. There's no way someone could have survived a blow like that. It bought us enough time to get to the door. I flung it open and stood staring at the empty stone corridor beyond. I slammed the door shut again and reopened it to the same sight. "No one is going anywhere," the king's booming voice reverberated through the chamber. "Not until they finish my game." The girl arrived beside me a second later. She ripped open the door a third time to see the same hall. "His game, his rules," she sighed in exasperation. The others would be on us in a matter of seconds. "On my signal, you open it again." "It's no good. We're still stuck in. You have to trust me," she said. "What signal?" But the signal was impossible to miss. A blade in my heart, staggering me to my knees. I forced myself upright and opened the door at once, seeing my school corridor with the Halloween stickers beyond. I leaped through and turned to see the girl still on her knees, hands pressing the knife into her own heart. The king was bellowing somewhere beyond. The shock must have been enough to break the spell separating the two dimensions for just a moment. With the last of her strength, the girl lunged forward and slammed the door in my face. I instinctively tried to open it once more, but the pain which overtook me was unbearable. I died a dozen times in the next few moments. My head was caved in, or lopped off entirely. The piercing of blades sliding between each rib, and other wounds which were harder to classify. There was a slaughter in progress on the other side of the door, and I was helpless to stop it. By the time the worst of it passed, I stood and flung the door open, ready to rush back and save who could be saved. I nearly tripped over myself entering the empty classroom. Lights off, desks pushed against the wall. There was no sign of the other world which I'd been cut off from. I don't know who survived in the end, if anyone. I can only hope that whatever black magic preserved us with the mending fingers saved her somehow. I hope that there is a queen who sits next upon the throne, and that she will break the tradition and go in peace. I tell myself that I'm the lucky one, but I don't know. How can I go back to living my life when so many parts of me will never leave the Fright Club room?